have the right solutions, and the climate community, the politicians, the policymakers, those at the negotiation table, they're just not listening right now. So thank you everyone for joining today. That means that you're taking some of your time to listen to some Tibetan voices and hear what they may have to offer to the conversation about climate change. Our first speaker today is going to be Dichin Pamela, who is a researcher and policy person with the Tibetan Policy Institute at the Central Tibetan Administration.
Good morning, Tashi Dilek, and thank you all for joining here today. So we have a high demand from the world leaders and from UNFCCC. So first one is to recognize the global ecological importance of the Tibetan Plateau. And the second is to strengthen the climate change research on the Tibetan Plateau. Third, to respect the traditional knowledge and way of life. And fourth is to strictly regulate urbanization and tourism inside Tibet. And fifth is global citizen action for Tibet's environment. So like Tibet, as she have mentioned before, it's the roof of the world. There are different names given to Tibet. Tibet as third pole, Tibet as the water tower of Asia, Tibet as the there are different names given, but nothing has been done to protect this fragile ecology of Tibet. So we ask the UNFCCC to not only talk, to do some action inside Tibet and protect this very important third pole of the world. Thank you.
Our next speaker that we're going to hear from today is Tenzin Chukila, who is a senior researcher with Free Tibet in the UK.
Hello, Tashi Dilek. Thank you for taking time to come here and listen to the delegation. Since we are actually standing right beside a river, right, I would like to the last words of an environmentalist from Tibet, Kunchal Jinpa, who passed away from torture in prison. And this last quote was shared to Tibetan exile media. I'm now at the bank of a river. There are many people behind me, watching me, and I'm sure to be arrested. Even if they arrest me, I'm not afraid. Even if they kill me, I have no regrets. But from now on, I will not be able to give reports. If there is no word for me, that means I have been arrested. So this is Kunchal Jinpa's last words on his social media account on WeChat, which is a messaging platform heavily used by Tibetans inside Tibet. He was detained in November 2013, and in February 2021, he died in a hospital in Lhasa, the capital city of Tibet, from brain hemorrhage, and he was completely and just paralyzed. And the reports that he have been sharing to Tibetan exile media were about the anti-mining protests that his villagers have been staging courageously under Chinese government's occupation to tell that they love the sacred mountain, Nablazan. And they have done it again and again. But the government has just forced political education campaigns and forced the local villagers to just raise the Chinese national flag. And this is how local Tibetans in Diru County, where Kunchal Jinpa is from, are still under just heavy restriction. And the impact of surveillance is such that this year we came to know that another Tibetan from Diru County, Shurmo, had burned himself alive in 2015 to protest against the repressive policies of the Chinese government. And until now, we did not know anything about it. And still, the Tibetan exile media, who depend on the spirit of the citizen journalists from inside Tibet, report just sporadically how Tibetans inside Tibet are suffering under the repressive policies. And 5 years of just surveillance of a Tibetan who burned himself alive, that is the level of repressive policy that has been systemized in the so-called Tibet Autonomous Region, where the party secretary Chen Quango just really systemized the whole thing. And then he was transferred to East Turkestan, where now we see the horrific state of the Uyghurs and Kazakhs in the concentration camps. And this is how the leadership under the party authoritarian state gets transferred in the occupied territories into China. Despite everything, we know that Tibetans inside Tibet sing of the value of their land. They write poems about the value of the relationship to their land. When they look around the land, they remember the memories that have been silenced to speak in writings and poems, but they still do. They still have never given up. And we hope that the world remembers that Tibetans inside Tibet have never given up their hope, their identity, and their love for homeland. Thank you.
Thank you, Chukila. And I think Chuki is like so compassionate and so knowledgeable. But when I hear her speak, all I feel is anger. The fact that there is somebody, Kunjok Jimba, who is willing to literally give his life for the climate, for the environment, for human rights, and for Tibet. How many people that came to COP26 from around the world would be able to give their actual whole life for the movement and for climate change, to stop climate change? And the fact that his story is silenced, it doesn't even have a platform. I think that makes me so frustrated. But Chuki is much more passionate and compassionate than I am. Our next speaker is Lobsang Yangsala from the International Tibet Network.
Tashi the Lake, everyone. Tashi the Lake. I'm Lobsang. Currently, I am in exile in India. When I was 10, I escaped to India through Nepal by crossing the Himalayas for more than 25 days. And after 25 years, I could go back to my home, Tibet, to meet the families. And when I reached my homeland, everything has changed. The land that my family owns has been forcefully taken away by the Chinese authorities. The sacred mountains that we Tibetan, my hometown, has been mined, and it has been destroyed. And the Tibetan people nearby my village, they have been displaced in the name of dam constructions. And the school that I went, the Tibetan language is teaching as a second language, and the monasteries that we have, Kanse Gomba and Tharke Gomba, the police stations are stationed, and CCTV cameras are set up over there to monitor the monks and nuns, because the monks and nuns has been very actively raising voices and asking for their basic human rights. They have been jailed. They have been jailed just by keeping a photo of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in their phones. And so that's the current situation that we see in my homeland and in Tibet. So this is definitely a genocide that is happening in Tibet, and China has illegally occupied Tibet. The river that flows in front of my hometown, when I was very young, I used to drink that. And after 25 years, when I went back, nobody was drinking it. It was not drinkable because it got polluted. And for Tibetans, in our culture and in our practices, water is the purest form that we offer in our shrines. And the water that we have in front of my homeland is not able to do that, and people can't use that. And Tibet, as my colleagues have earlier spoke about, has a huge water resources. The major Asian rivers like Yalungtsangbo, Brahmaputra, Mekong River, and Yellow River, the Indus River, are all originates from Tibet. but Tibet right now is facing a climate crisis, and moreover, the Chinese government's policies are further degrading the Tibet's environment. And when Tibet gets a climate change and glaciers are melting, it not only affects the Tibetans, but millions of people living downstreams. People from India, in China, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, and Burma. But what happened over here in COP26, Tibetans do not have representation in the COP26. Nobody is talking what is happening in terms of environment destruction and climate change crisis in Tibet, and nobody is talking over there. When the Chinese government, they introduce development policies, Tibetans are never consulted. Tibetans do not have the rights to participate in the decision making or the climate policy making. They don't have a right in the climate policy implementation as well. Thus, we ask the Tibetans to be included in the climate policy making and also in the implementation as well. Thank you. Lastly, I would also urge that the downstream nation has to be strong. They should unify, and they should ask for a transparent scientific collaboration and research inside Tibet and see what is actually happening in Tibet. Suppose like the river, the Yalung-Tsangbo, the Brahmaputra, China has already dammed the Brahmaputra, and they have 3 more. Officially, they say that they have plan to build dam, 3 more dams on the Yalung-Tsangbo, but we have researchers and scholars saying that China has planned to build 11 more dams to build, but the countries, the downstream countries have no idea, and they don't have access to what is happening on the Yalung-Tsangbo. And dam construction and the mining is also causing desertification and threatening the ecosystem and the people living nearby. So thank you so much, and all of you coming over here means a lot to us and for the Tibetans inside Tibet. If I were in Tibet, I won't be able to come here. And if this even has been happened in Tibet, you and me would be in jail. Immediately after a few seconds, there would be Chinese police surrounding us. And I really appreciate the freedom that I enjoyed right now. When I went back to Tibet to meet my family, and I realized what a freedom means. As soon as I landed in Nepal, when I came back after 2.5 months, I realized the meaning of what freedom is. When I was in Tibet, it took few weeks to really trust the Tibetans and even my family members, because in a small village, they have set up informers in the village. They have set up a CCTV camera. My village is a very small, with maybe only 80 families over there. We have a police station over there just to monitor what the Tibetans are doing. So there is a fear that they have created and internalized. That's what is happening inside Tibet. And thank you so much for your support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nyansala, for sharing a lot of your personal experiences as well. I think that every single person who spoke today, none of us are scientists, none of us are climate experts, but we all were forced to become people who know about the climate because of the fact that our families are from Tibet, and because that is a part of who we are. And these facts, once you know them, you just can't get them out of your head. And yesterday we had a side event where we had an anthropologist and a glaciologist, and what they were talking about was a conversation that's different and terrifying. They were saying it's not a question of will there be a climate crisis that leads to mass refugee problems in the global south and Asia when Tibet dries up or when the glaciers melt. The question is, when will it happen, and how can we plan for that? How can we plan for the tremendous food shortages when Tibet's glaciers and rivers dry out? Because more than half of the entire world's population rely on Tibet's water for food security, and more than 20% of the world's population rely on Tibet's water directly for water security. What happens, and when will it happen? And the problem is that no one is actually thinking about who are the best people to solve this problem. It is the Tibetan nomads, the Tibetan people, those that have stewarded and protected the waters and the mountains and the grasslands that act as a carbon sink for all the dirty fossil fuel emitting Western countries around the world. What happens when the permafrost melts and there's desertification and that carbon sink is lost? Not just Tibetans, not just the global south, but everyone in the entire world will feel the consequences of that. And yet, there is not a single Tibetan nomadic voice at the negotiation table to keep 1.5 alive. I said earlier that even if we manage to keep 1.5 alive, 36% of Tibet's glaciers will be gone. The homeland for so many diverse species and Tibetan nomads and people that have lived there for thousands of years will be gone, even if 1.5 is kept alive, and none of those people have a voice at the table. But what happens if it continues as it is now? Even more catastrophic results. 2/3 of Tibet's glaciers, or possibly more, could be melted by the end of my lifetime. The human being you're looking at right now. My lifespan shouldn't be the same as that of a glacier that's been around for millions of years. The Tibetan glaciers have been there for millions of years, and humans are just a speck in the history. And Tibetan nomads have kept those glaciers protected and healthy for 8,000 years. So why do they not have a seat at the negotiation table? Why do they not have a platform to share their wisdom and their knowledge about the climate with the climate community? So those are the questions we're asking here today. We also have not had an opportunity to have a side event at the official COP26, and therefore we've had to create our own side event, our own platform to share these stories and these voices. We had our first one yesterday, and it was a really intriguing and interesting discussion and conversation. Our second side event will be this coming Sunday at 6:30 p.m. and there'll be dinner served, including some Tibetan food. I don't think there's vegetarian Tibetan food this time. Sorry. I hope that's not a deal breaker. But we actually have an incredibly special guest that's coming to our side events on Sunday. It's a human rights defender from Tibet who has literally stared death in the face for the sake of preserving human rights and for furthering the amplification of Tibetan voices from inside Tibet. He actually went around Tibet and filmed a documentary capturing the authentic voices of Tibetans, which in Tibet, as you can hear from Lobsang Yangtze's stories, it's a death sentence for yourself doing something like this. And he did it. He's been detained more than 3 times. He's been tortured himself, and he's been in exile for just a few years now. And he's coming all the way from Switzerland to Glasgow just to share his story with the climate community. And so if you guys have the time, please join us on Sunday at 6:30 p.m. for the side event.
Where?
It's going to be at 67 Hope Street, and there's some folks with flyers around here. That person holding up papers. And we'll also have an Indigenous activist from Indian Collective, who's the Creative Resistance Director for Indian Collective. His name is Sai Wagner, and he's a longtime friend and ally of the Tibet movement, but also a leader from an Indigenous voice that leads the movement for against climate change within the Indigenous community as well. And so we also have climate researcher Chukila, who will be sharing more stories and experiences like the one that she shared today with us here. So please join us on Sunday. And me. Thank you so much, everybody. And is there anything else on the program today? We're going to have one more encore performance by Chodila.
I might do the same song again. Okay, it's so amazing to see our Tibetan women taking this Tibet climate crisis in. Anyway. Sometimes I forget what I'm about to say, but I can sing, which is good. I don't forget about that one. We'll do the same song again. I think that, and then we can end with the beginning as we started, so we can kind of go back to the beginning. Okay? Okay. So those who haven't been at, those who were not here at the beginning, you just need to know a syllable. Can you say so? So. Can you say so in your on the top of your voice? So. Okay. So you just have to sing it with me, okay? And you'll know when to come in. Okay? So, okay, these days it's really fearful to breathe in. So take a deep breath. And on the count of 3, can you say, stop the melting on Tibet, okay? 1, 2, 3. Stop the melting and then free Tibet, okay? 1, 2, 3. Free Tibet! Free Tibet! Now that the sign of earth is dissolving into water, water into fire, fire into air, air into consciousness. Take a deep breath. So, free Tibet!
Thank you, Togila. And anyone new who's listening, we have a side event on Sunday at 6:30 p.m. Where we will have a Tibetan human rights defender.
Oh, good morning, Independence Live. This is Iain here. I'll let this ambulance go by.
The intersection of colonization and climate change.
Oh, look, an electric bus.
You guys can join the discussion.
Hope we enjoyed that. That was some of the non-delegates from Tibet who, very similar situation to Scotland, don't have their voices represented at this COP26 as they're not an independent nation. But this is effectively it. This is the entrance. This is as far as I can get at the moment. We'll have a walk up here through to the youth protest that's happening. Hope you're all well. I see Peter Roberts watching, Jerry Kaelin. Remember to help us spread the appetite for Scottish independence and freedom by liking and sharing all the content you see on Indie Live. We'll try and cover as much of this COP as we can on the grounds. As you can see, we've got some professors from Sudan here.
الهزيمة صد خيلة والعزيمة شد خيلة النضال والعدالة والثورة خيار الشعب حرية سلام وعدالة مدنية خيار الشعب حرية سلام وعدالة مدنية خيار الشعب حرية سلام وعدالة.
Upon the back of anyone who chooses to carry me through field, village and city, day by day, town to town, to where leaders are gathering like ropes before the storm. Ask me where I'm going. Ask me what is my purpose. Ask me what my name is. They call me the Coast of
Hope with the holy coat. So, as you can see, there's the venue down there. Security is pretty tight, to say the least. I know there's a few more things happening up here, so we'll have a walk around, but what I might do is wrap up the stream for a wee bit so I can get ready. I think there's the youth march heading from Kelvin Grove to George Square, so we'll pop along and cover that so that you can have some eyes on the ground as they like to try and do it Indie Live. Yeah, there's a lot of different activities happening across the city for the remainder of this COP. We'll try and cover as many of them as we can. Probably worth shouting out as well now that we've got a crowdfunder running at Indie Live for the last one of the year. So the more you support us, the more that we can try and do to become a independent media source for Scotland. Yeah, industry once I've caught up with this boy here. I seen him yesterday. I think he's been here all week actually, to be fair. Take you to the dark side. Thought Darth Vader was going to get himself lifted there.
Hey, how you doing?
Very good, we're on Independence Live.
Independence Live?
Yeah, I thought Darth Vader was about to get lifted there.
Oh, wow. Any requests? Any song requests? Or do you have any questions? What can we do for you?
Well, what is it you're doing over here? What's brought you to Glasgow?
I am so glad you asked. All right, so I'm an American of Scottish descent, proudly, and I am here coming home to bring some very important messages to the world. Number one, there is one way to cool our planet in time, and it's not decarbonization. And it's not that I'm opposed to decarbonization, but we need, in addition to decarbonization, solar radiation management, SRM for short. What is that? Very simple. Reflecting enough sunlight back into space that we reverse the heat imbalance, right? And actually cool the planet. We are overheated and we are overheating at an exponential rate, and we can't take it anymore. We can't even take another year of this. And so there is a Scotsman at University of Edinburgh, Professor Stephen Salter, who is the thought leader of marine cloud brightening. He's standing on the shoulders of giants, and he's the first to acknowledge that. He doesn't really toot his own horn very much, so I'm happy to toot it for him. So that is the most scalable, most efficient, most effective way to cool our planet in time. That's the most efficient form of SRM. See, SRM is a broader class of solutions, which includes the Arctic Ice Project, which is a different way of reflecting sunlight back into space. But what it all has in common, it's basically mirrors, right? The mirrors can be droplets of water, like in marine cloud brightening. They can be silica powder, as in the Arctic Ice Project. They can be actual mirrors, as in Dr. Yetao's mirror reflection program. There are myriad different ways of reflecting sunlight back into space. As long as we have the amount of carbon in the atmosphere that we do, or anywhere near that, it doesn't matter. We could completely eliminate carbon emissions tonight, and we're still going to keep overheating exponentially. Because we're trapping heat. We're taking in way more heat than what we're shedding, right? So we have a massive heat imbalance, and we need to correct that. We're almost out of Arctic ice. The Arctic ice, as you know, is a giant mirror which reflects sunlight back into space. That's extremely important. Take away that mirror and you've got dark blue ocean seawater absorbing all that sunlight. So we need to save the mirrors that we have. We got to have a Save the Mirrors campaign or something. But also build and install and implement new reflectivity, fresh new reflectivity to complement nature's reflectivity, so that we finally reverse the heat imbalance and cool the planet. So that's one mega solution that we are promoting. That has one singular objective, which is to cool the planet. There's another mega solution that we're promoting that actually has two objectives rolled into one, kind of like a cereal box where you get a toy inside. Two things in one. What are those two things? The two things are ending world hunger and transitioning the world to a plant-based diet. How do we accomplish both of those at once? I'm so glad you asked. What do? We make plant-based foods freely available to everyone. We make food a basic human right. As a first step towards making all basic human needs, thank you, basic human rights. What am I, a communist? What are you, come and arrest me? Communist. I'm not a communist.
Well, would that not be universal basic income?
Well, it can be accomplished through universal basic income, but there's a more efficient way, which is to provision the goods and services. Like, see, that final poster there has community cafe, food healers. These are different programs to feed people for free, right? So rather than give them money so they can go to some grocery store that's refrigerated and buy food in single-use plastic and drive home in an SUV and stick it in some, it's way more efficient to create giant batches of plant-based stew. That doesn't take away from nutrition or taste or anything, right? And make that freely available. And so that's what we're doing in California, and and in Arizona. We need to expand it all over the world, right? Okay. And again, that accomplishes two objectives: end hunger and malnutrition, and get the world to transition to a plant-based diet. Okay. Now, so these are two mega solutions I've talked about: cooling the planet with SRM, feeding everyone plant-based foods. Both of these mega solutions are the two most urgent, but there are many solutions that we urgently need. So if you don't mind stepping over here, how do we co-create and implement all these solutions? If you think of these solutions like golden eggs, right? We need that which will generate the golden eggs, not just the ideas, but all the way through to implementation. We've had the ideas of marine cloud brightening for many years, decades in fact, but they're stuck on the shelf, okay? We need to get them down from the shelf and into reality. And so solutions, by solution I mean full implementation, not just the idea. So we need the goose that will lay the golden eggs. What's the goose? You got a goose? You got a goose under there? The goose is collective intelligence, okay? Humanity coming together in conversation like we're doing right now. This is collective intelligence right now. This back and forth is collective intelligence. And the best way to scale up collective intelligence is by building and stoking a massive network of conversations, right? Now, there's conversations happening all over the world, on the internet, in person, here, there, and everywhere. But what's missing? The networking! We're all fragmented, right? We're totally separate. These conversations are totally separate. We're living in the wrong paradigm of separation and hoarding information. Well, I'm going to take this information and I'm going to patent it and I'm going to monetize it and I'm going to get credit for it, or I'm going to publish it and get a PhD and then tenure or something like that. We're all looking out for me, 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 me. We need to be looking out for we, right? So collective intelligence is the goose that will lay all these golden eggs that we urgently need to cool the planet, to feed everyone, and to stop the killing machine. Right? Killing animals to eat their flesh? What? Decimating the Amazon rainforest and forests and ecosystems all around the world so we can eat meat? But you need to eat meat. How can you have any pudding if you don't eat your meat? Stand still, will ya? Right? We can eat plant-based meat and still get your pudding.
See, I would argue that we made the evolutionary step in humanity when we started processing meat, we started cooking meats and getting the right proteins out of it. So we've maybe got our minds to the point where we could try and wind that back, but we have got there because of what we've put into our bodies, the fuel we've given us, the way that we've evolved has been because of meat. So it's maybe something that if we took it out, where would we be 1,000 years, 10,000 years from now as a species if we didn't have that protein in our body?
These are really good questions. And these are really good. These are exactly the kinds of questions that belong here and here and here and here. Yeah. Right? Because you may be right, I may be crazy, but it just might be a lunatic you're looking for. Right? So let's have the conversation, and then we can find out who's crazy, who's wrong, who's right. How do we strike the right balance? Maybe it's lab-grown meat. Maybe it's no meat at all. Maybe we can get all the nutrients that we need just with plants. Is that possible? I don't know. Let's have the conversation. Let's talk about it. Let's figure it out together. There is no end to what we can do together.
Well, Darth, I'm going to go before you set off my copyright bots, but it's been an absolute pleasure, sir. Stay safe.
Thank you so much, and come back anytime. And
yeah, not in a hurry. Oh yeah, as I said, he was making quite a bit of sense till we went down the vegan route. But yeah, I'm going to wrap up here for the now of the stream, get to the front of this